Ever wondered why basketball legend Bill Laimbeer wore rubber suits in sweltering heat? Or how a famous Star Trek writer created the show's terrifying lizard people? From actors working 2 shows simultaneously to deleted movie cameos and a fully constructed language designed by a UCLA professor, the original Land of the Lost hides secrets far stranger than its puppet dinosaurs and time-warping pylons. Fact 1. Star Trek's Tribbles. Writer created the Slee Stacks before Land of the Lost became a Saturday morning staple. David Gerrold was already famous in science fiction circles for writing one of the most beloved Star Trek episodes ever made, The Trouble with Tribbles, which aired in 1967. When Sid and Marty Krofft approached him in the early 1970s about developing a new children's show that would mix dinosaurs with a Swiss Family Robinson-style survival story, Gerrold brought something unexpected to the table: serious science fiction credentials and a network of talented writers from the Star Trek universe. Though Gerrold went uncredited as the show's creator due to contractual complications, he was responsible for developing the overall story arc and mythology that made Land of the Lost so much more sophisticated than typical Saturday morning fare. Most importantly, Gerrold created the Slee Stacks, the 7-foot-tall hissing lizard creatures that became the show's most memorable villains. He designed them as a terrifying alternative to the dinosaurs, which couldn't be featured constantly because of budget restraints. The Slee Stacks weren't just random monsters, they had an elaborate backstory as the devolved descendants of an advanced civilization called the Altrusians, complete with their own lost city and ancient technology. This kind of detailed world building was virtually unheard of in children's television at the time, and it came directly from Gerrold's experience crafting complex narratives for Star Trek. Fact 2. NBA legend Bill Laimbeer was a Slee Stack. When producers needed actors tall enough to portray the intimidating 7-foot Slee Stacks, they turned to an unusual casting pool: local college basketball players in the Los Angeles area. Among them was a high school senior from Palos Verdes named William Laimbeer, who would later become one of the most notorious players in NBA history as a key member of the Detroit Pistons' Bad Boys era in the 1980s. During the show's first season in 1974, the teenage Laimbeer spent his time before basketball stardom wearing a heavy rubber suit and hissing at the Marshall family in the Lost City. According to Wesley Ure, who played Will Marshall, Laimbeer was the most popular Slee Stack among the cast and crew. Years later, when Ure and the original cast held a reunion, Laimbeer couldn't attend due to other commitments. But the fact that an NBA legend had been part of the show remained a point of pride. In 2019, when Laimbeer was coaching the WNBA's Las Vegas Aces, Ure surprised him with a gift: a piece of art signed by most of the other actors who had played Slee Stacks on the show, and the entire Aces team posed for photos wearing Slee Stack masks to celebrate their coach's unlikely television past. Fact 3. Only 3 Slee Stack costumes existed. Despite the Slee Stacks being portrayed as a vast civilization of 7,000 individuals, according to the show's Library of Skulls, the production faced a serious limitation. Budget constraints meant only 3 complete Slee Stack costumes were ever created for the entire series run from 1974 to 1976. This meant that no matter how many Slee Stacks a scene script called for, only 3 could ever appear on screen at the same time. To create the illusion of larger numbers, the production team had to get creative with their filming and editing techniques. They would shoot the same 3 Slee Stacks from multiple angles, then edit the footage together with extra inserts to make it appear as though there were more creatures surrounding the Marshall family. Close-ups of individual Slee Stacks would be interspersed with wide shots, and careful camera work helped disguise the fact that viewers were seeing the same 3 costumes over and over again. This limitation actually added to the show's charm in retrospect, as fans who watched carefully could sometimes spot the same recognizable Slee Stack appearing in multiple positions within a single scene. The 3 costumes were used so extensively throughout the series that they became worn and required constant maintenance and repair between filming sessions. Fact 4. Slee Stack costumes were built on wetsuits. Playing a Slee Stack wasn't glamorous work. It was sweaty, uncomfortable, and physically demanding. The production team constructed the reptilian costumes by building them directly onto scuba diving wetsuits as a base layer, which created a fundamental problem. Wetsuits are designed to retain body heat underwater, making them absolutely miserable to wear for hours under hot studio lights. The basketball players who wore these costumes had to endure temperatures that quickly became stifling inside the rubber suits, with very limited ventilation and no way to cool down between takes. The wetsuit foundation meant the costumes fit tightly against the actors' bodies, trapping heat and moisture and making even simple movements exhausting. Adding to the discomfort, the suits were covered with rubber scales that had been glued on individually and topped with foam latex heads, featuring the Sleestack's distinctive bug-eyed appearance and single horn. The actors inside couldn't see very well through the costume heads and had to navigate the show's cave sets and outdoor locations essentially half-blind, while trying not to trip over rocks or bump into the other performers. Despite these challenging conditions, the basketball players returned week after week to bring the creatures to life, creating some of the most memorable villains in Saturday morning television history through sheer physical endurance. Fact 5. A UCLA linguist created a real language. When NBC executives wanted Land of the Lost to have educational value to satisfy FCC requirements, the Croft brothers decided to go far beyond the typical approach of having primitive characters grunt or speak backward English. They hired Victoria Fromkin, the head of UCLA's linguistics department and a pioneering researcher in speech errors and language processing, to create an entirely new language from scratch for the Pakuni characters. Fromkin took the challenge seriously, developing what would become the first properly constructed language created specifically for a children's television show and the first instance of a TV series hiring a professional linguist for such a project. She built the Pakuni language with a complete vocabulary of 300 words and established full grammatical rules and syntax, basing the sounds on West African speech patterns to make it feel authentic and exotic while still being pronounceable for young actors and potentially learnable for children watching at home. The language wasn't just random syllables, it had a structure with subjects, verbs, and objects arranged according to specific rules, along with pronouns, adjectives, and question words. Fromkin translated scripts into Pakuni for the show's first 2 seasons, and the language featured prominently in episodes like Tar Pit, where almost the entire episode was spoken in Pakuni. Though NBC's censors demanded full translations of all Pakuni dialogue, fearing Fromkin might have slipped in expletives, the language was perfectly innocent and represented a remarkable commitment to authenticity in children's programming. Fact 6. The star leftover merchandising money. Spencer Milligan, who played park ranger and father Rick Marshall for the show's first 2 seasons, became the face of Land of the Lost, appearing on everything from lunchboxes and board games to Viewmaster reels and coloring books. However, when Milligan discovered that toy manufacturers and merchandising companies were profiting from his likeness while he and his co-stars received no additional compensation beyond their regular salaries, he felt the situation was fundamentally unfair. In a 2009 interview with the Associated Press, Milligan explained his position simply: "We had a difference of opinion. Let's put it this way, on using my face for stuff and paying me. Lunchboxes, compasses, where they were selling them, and I thought it was only fair that everyone should get their fair share." When the producers refused to negotiate merchandising royalties or profit sharing with the cast for the 3rd season, Milligan made the difficult decision to walk away from the show that had made him famous. He wanted not just a salary increase for himself, but compensation for all the cast members whose images were being used commercially. The producers chose not to meet his demands, fundamentally changing the show's direction and leading to one of the most awkward replacement scenarios in television history. Fact 7. A producer in a wig played the exit scene. When Spencer Milligan refused to return for the 3rd season over the merchandising dispute, the writers faced a challenge. They needed to explain Rick Marshall's absence while literally having no actor available to film his departure. Their solution was both creative and slightly absurd. For the Season 3 premiere episode, Aftershock, they wrote a scene where Rick Marshall disappears through a time doorway while working at a pylon during an earthquake. The catch was that they needed someone to physically portray Rick for these final moments on screen. Enter John Kubichan, the show's producer and writer, who agreed to stand in for Milligan wearing a wig styled to resemble the departed actor's distinctive hairstyle. Throughout the entire scene, Kubican kept his back turned to the camera at all times, never allowing viewers to see his face, while Rick Marshall essentially backs his way into a glowing time portal and vanishes forever. The scene was then used in the new opening credits sequence throughout Season 3 to explain why Uncle Jack had taken over as the adult guardian for Will and Holly. For attentive viewers, the stiffness and awkwardness of Rick's final moments were noticeably different from Milligan's natural performance style. But the clever camera work managed to sell the departure well enough that casual viewers likely never realized they were watching a producer in a wig rather than the show's actual star. Fact 8. Will Marshall worked 2 shows at once. Wesley Ure had one of the most demanding schedules in television during the mid-1970s, simultaneously appearing on 2 different NBC shows in completely different genres. While playing 16-year-old adventurer Will Marshall on the Saturday morning science fiction series Land of the Lost, Ure was also portraying Dr. Michael Horton on the popular daytime soap opera Days of Our Lives, a role he began in 1974 and continued until 1981. This meant Ure was constantly juggling filming schedules, shooting Land of the Lost during its regular production periods while also maintaining his commitment to the daily soap opera that required him to appear in multiple episodes per week. He had initially been hesitant to audition for the Croft brothers because of his Days of Our Lives contract and concerns about playing a character younger than his actual age, but he managed to negotiate an arrangement that allowed him to do both shows without conflict. As a publicity stunt, Ure agreed to be billed simply as Wesley on Land of the Lost without his last name. A decision he later regretted because it made his professional identity confusing. The gold chain Ure wore throughout Land of the Lost was actually a personal gift from his then romantic partner, adding a touch of his real life to the fantasy world he inhabited on screen every Saturday morning. Fact 9. A Sleestak costume appeared on the A-Team. The Sleestak costumes didn't disappear after Land of the Lost ended its run in 1976. At least one of them found new life on a completely different television series nearly a decade later. In the 1980s action series The A-Team, known for the team's elaborate disguises and cons led by the cigar-chomping Colonel Hannibal Smith, one episode featured a scheme that required a monster costume. Rather than creating something entirely new, the production borrowed one of the original Sleestak suits from Land of the Lost, dressing it up as a character called Larry the Lizard as part of one of Hannibal's trademark ruses. The distinctive 7-foot green reptilian suit with its bug eyes, single horn, and yellow chest scales was instantly recognizable to fans of the Croft series, creating an unexpected crossover moment between 2 very different shows. This represented one of the rare instances where a creature costume from a children's Saturday morning show appeared in a primetime action series, and it demonstrated the lasting impact and recognizability of the Sleestak design. For Land of the Lost fans who also watched the A-Team, spotting the familiar costume in this completely different context was a delightful surprise and a testament to how iconic the Sleestak appearance had become in television history. Fact 10. Chaka suddenly spoke English in Season 3. In the first 2 seasons of Land of the Lost, Chaka and his fellow Pakuni communicated exclusively in their own constructed language, with the Marshall family gradually learning to understand them and viewers getting used to reading subtitles or context clues. However, when Season 3 began in 1976, viewers were shocked to hear Chaka suddenly speaking broken English with no explanation for this dramatic change. The reason had nothing to do with the story and everything to do with behind-the-scenes production realities. Sid and Marty Krofft had launched a new program called The Krofft Super Show, an hour-long variety series that contained segments from 3 different shows, which significantly increased their production workload and time pressures. Constructing proper Pakuni dialogue using Victoria Fromkin's carefully designed language, then translating it for the scripts and ensuring actors pronounced it correctly had become too time-consuming for the streamlined production schedule the Crofts now needed to maintain. Rather than simplifying the Pakuni language or finding a middle ground, the producers made the abrupt decision to have Chaka speak English, completely abandoning one of the show's most distinctive and educational elements. This change coincided with the disappearance of Chaka's parents, Ta and Sa, who obviously wouldn't be speaking English either, fundamentally altering the show's linguistic landscape and disappointing fans who had appreciated the authenticity of the original Pakuni communication. Fact 11. Star Trek veterans wrote most episodes. David Gerrold didn't just bring his own science fiction expertise to Land of the Lost. He brought along an impressive roster of writers who had worked on Star Trek and other major science fiction properties, elevating the show far above typical Saturday morning television fare. The writing staff included D.C. Fontana, who had been a story editor and writer on the original Star Trek series and would later work on Star Trek, the animated series, and Star Trek: The Next Generation. Walter Koenig, who played Ensign Chekhov on Star Trek, wrote episodes for Land of the Lost after being left out of the animated series due to budget restrictions. Larry Niven, a Hugo and Nebula award-winning science fiction author who had written for Star Trek: The Animated Series, contributed scripts that brought hard science fiction concepts to the show. Norman Spinrad, who wrote The Doomsday Machine for Star Trek, added his talents to the mix, as did Theodore Sturgeon and Ben Bova, all respected names in the science fiction community. This concentration of serious science fiction talent was unprecedented for a children's show and resulted in episodes that dealt with complex concepts like time paradoxes, alternate dimensions, and advanced alien technologies with a level of sophistication rarely seen in programming aimed at young audiences. The writers created an internally consistent mythology for the Land of the Lost, complete with the pylons that controlled the environment, the time doorways that brought visitors to this pocket universe, and the tragic history of the Sleestak civilization, treating the material with the same seriousness they would bring to adult science fiction. Fact 12. Stop motion mixed with live video. Was revolutionary Land of the Lost achieved a distinctive visual style by pioneering a technically challenging process that most productions avoided, combining stop-motion animated dinosaurs filmed on movie film with live-action footage shot on videotape. This created significant complications because film and video are fundamentally different recording media with different characteristics, frame rates, and color properties. Most productions that mixed live action with stop-motion animation used film for both elements, which was easier to composite together but created a telltale blue fringe or halo around the animated elements due to the limitations of optical printing and traveling matte techniques available in the 1970s. The Land of the Lost production team, working with special effects company Excelsior Animated Moving Pictures, developed methods to combine these two different media types while avoiding that blue fringe, creating composites that looked cleaner than what most film productions could achieve at the time. However, the process wasn't perfect, and the difference in lighting quality and color saturation between the video-recorded live actors and the film-recorded stop-motion dinosaurs was sometimes quite obvious, inadvertently drawing attention to the technical limitations even as it solved other problems. The dinosaurs themselves were created by Gene Warren Jr., Peter Kleinow, and Harry Walton, with dinosaur model designs by Hua Chang, and their animation was frequently reused throughout the series to stretch the limited special effects budget as far as possible. Fact 13. Original TV stars' cameos were cut from the movie. When Universal Pictures developed the 2009 Land of the Lost movie starring Will Ferrell, the studio made an effort to honor the original series by inviting Wesley Ury and Kathy Coleman, who played Will and Holly Marshall in the 1970s show, to film cameo appearances. The scene was set at the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles and was intended to appear at the end of the film, requiring several weeks of filming with a large cast and crew to capture what was described as an expensive sequence. Uhr and Coleman were excited to be part of the big screen adaptation and spent time on set working with Ferrell and the modern production team. However, during post-production, the filmmakers decided that the scene didn't work within the context of the movie's tone and pacing, and made the difficult decision to cut not just Ure and Coleman's cameos, but the entire sequence they appeared in. On his website, Ure addressed the disappointment directly, writing, "Well, it is official. The scene Kathy and I filmed with Will Ferrell has been cut out of the movie. Truth be told, it sucks not being in the movie. It wasn't just our scene cut, but the entire sequence we were in, so hopefully it wasn't my acting." He added the classic Hollywood phrase about being left on the cutting room floor, and later mentioned that at one point there had been plans for him to have another cameo as well. The deleted scene can be found on the Blu-ray release's special features, giving fans a chance to see what might have been. Fact 14. The show had only 43 episodes, despite Land of the Lost becoming one of the most memorable and frequently discussed Saturday morning shows of the 1970s. With a cultural impact that far exceeded its actual production scope, the original series ran for just 3 seasons from 1974 to 1976 and produced only 43 total episodes. This relatively short run was typical for expensive science fiction shows of the era, as the costs of creating the stop-motion dinosaurs, building the elaborate cave and Lost City sets, and maintaining the Sleestak costumes and other special effects made each episode significantly more costly to produce than standard animated or live-action children's programming. The show aired on NBC's Saturday morning lineup and became a hit with audiences, but after Spencer Milligan's departure and the various production changes in Season 3, NBC decided not to renew the series for a 4th season, partly due to the high production costs and partly because the network was shifting its Saturday morning focus toward less expensive programming and more sports coverage. However, the show's relatively brief original run didn't limit its influence at all. Land of the Lost became enormously popular in syndication throughout the late 1970s and 1980s, with those 43 episodes being rerun so frequently that multiple generations of children grew up watching the Marshall family's adventures, leading to the show's cult classic status and eventually inspiring both the 1991 television remake and the 2009 feature film. Fact 15. It was Croft's most serious production. Sid and Marty Krofft had built their reputation on creating wildly colorful, surreal, and comedic children's shows like H.R. Pufnstuf, which featured a talking dragon and singing characters in an acid trip fantasy world, and Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, which followed the adventures of a friendly sea monster who couldn't scare anyone. These shows embraced absurdist humor, slapstick comedy, and intentionally campy performances that made them feel like fever dreams brought to life through puppetry and costume work. Land of the Lost represented a dramatic departure from this established Krofft formula, presenting a survival story with genuine danger, dramatic stakes, and a relatively serious tone, especially during its first season under David Gerrold's guidance. While the show certainly had lighter moments and the occasional awkward acting that came with the territory of low-budget television, it treated its science fiction concepts with respect and created real tension through encounters with dinosaurs and Sleestaks that felt threatening rather than silly. The episodes dealt with mature themes like isolation, family separation, the rise and fall of civilizations, and the consequences of advanced technology, with storylines that encouraged viewers to think about time paradoxes and ecological systems rather than just laugh at costumed characters. This more dramatic approach made Land of the Lost stand out not just from other Krofft productions, but from Saturday morning television in general, creating a show that children found genuinely exciting and sometimes frightening rather than simply entertaining, and contributing to its lasting reputation as one of the most sophisticated children's science fiction series ever produced.